and welcome to the shed. In today's video we're going to be making the poor man's strop. Hope you enjoy. What we're going to be doing here is obviously making a cheaper version of a strop. You've seen my usual strop here that's just a piece of leather stuck on a bit of MDF, and if you're lucky enough to find a bit of cheap leather you could use that. But what if you can't find leather, or you don't want to have to go buy some leather? What can you use for a strop? And that's what we're going to cover today. So what I've got here is a piece of plywood and a piece of MDF, and we're going to go ahead and use these as strops. We're going to be applying honing compound to them, and then to show you how well they work, because obviously making the poor man's strop is a very quick process since we've already got some offcuts here. I'm going to use these 3 different chisels that are actually straight from the shop. They haven't actually been sharpened other than the initial sharpening that they get at the manufacturer. So what I'm going to do is show you it on the plywood and on the MDF, and I'm going to use 2 different chisels for that and show you the results, and then we're going to go ahead and do one on the leather and see if there's any differences, and just to show that the poor man's strop works perfectly well. So let's get this set up. We're going to use this wide chisel on this one here, we're going to use this one on the MDF, and this more narrow one just here on the leather strop. So let's start by adding some compound. This is just Josco compound. It's aluminium oxide compound like any of them. These are the ones designed for buffing wheels on your grinder, and fairly cheap. You get a very large block and that's going to last ages, and from what I've seen it works just as the same as the little tiny blocks that you buy that are a lot more expensive. So that's one tip there. So what we've got to do is obviously apply it on here. Now this plywood I'm using has kind of a rough surface to it. It's a construction grade, and I find that works better for actually holding the honing compound. We just want to get a nice amount all over this strop. So we're going to go and put the honing compound on all of these before we start. Reason being, we're going to put this over into the vise just for safety while we're using it. And we're also going to apply it to the leather strop, as you can see here. And I don't always use honing compound on a leather strop because of the thickness and the grain of the leather. You don't necessarily have to, but for this we're going to use honing compound. So now we've got these done, let's throw the first one being the plywood, second one being the MDF, and then the leather. So we're going to go in that order. So first of all, let's throw the plywood into the vise and we'll get started. So the process when I strop is about 50 strokes on the bevel, and then a few on the back, and then I just counteract back front, just to flip any burr over and remove it. The technique I use is locking the wrists and then just rocking at the hips, just like I do when I freehand sharpen. So let's get started. Now to my count that's about 50, so then we'll do a couple on the back. Just give the bevel a quick clean off here. Some of the honing compound is stuck to the bevel. Now we can see, and you probably can't see it because it's gone really shiny on the camera here, but we're super shiny along that bevel now, which means that it's done its job as a strop. And if we look at the strop here, we can see we've got the black material, and that is obviously metal that's been removed from the abrasive of the honing compound. So let's move on to the MDF now. once again, got a little build up of the honing compound on this bevel. Because it's not been sharpened on my stones, it's got a little bit of a rough spot still, so that's where the honing compound is sticking. I can see on the camera that it's telling me that that's really shiny along here, and that it's oversaturating it on the camera. And we can see that is nice and shiny on the edge there. And if we look at the strop, ignore where I dug my chisel in, you don't really want to do that. But you can see once again the black material here means that the metal's been taken off. Now, with these strops where I've used them in the past, I find the longer you use them, the more that honing compound beds in, the better it works. And it stops it from sticking to the bevel and everything once it's kind of worked itself in. Still had a little bit stuck on here once again. And we can see that that one's come up very shiny as well, except a little bit less stuck to it because there's a couple of different facets because of the way it was machined at the factory. The edge was partially polished and the back of the bevel wasn't, and so I don't know if you can see that, but there's a couple of different facets on this bevel, and it's kind of merged them in a little bit better using the leather. However, if we compare all three of these, so that's plywood, MDF and the leather, we can see they all look very similar in their appearance, and they're all polished to a very sharp edge. So to determine that, let's grab a piece of pine, which is always going to be the hardest to show up how sharp a blade is, and although these haven't been sharpened, they've just been honed, we'll see how well they do. So I have a really nasty rough piece of construction pine here, so let's see how well the plywood strop did. So we can see we got a very nice cross grain cut here with this, although it could be a little bit sharper if we fully ran through the sharpening process. We're actually getting a very clean cut here considering it's not had a sharpening stone. So let me turn it around and we can check this corner over here with the MDF strop. And once again, we can see that we're actually getting a pretty good cut, particularly on the angle here for just a strop blade. And then I'll flip it over to the other side for you guys, and we'll compare it to the leather strop. Right, this is a very rough grain, but it is still managing to slice it, although as you can see there, it's a fairly rough grain, and although they are slicing it and they're doing a fairly good job, especially on the corner, if they were truly sharp, and that means going through our normal grits and then a polish, they're going to cut that a lot better than this. But for this test, which was just stropping on blades that you've just bought that have just had a factory machining on them. Yes, these are Japanese chisels, but they're the only ones I've got that I haven't actually sharpened yet, so I thought it would be a good way to show you how effective these strops are. So there you have it, folks. The Poor Man or Cheap Strop works very well, whether it's on plywood or MDF, and obviously it works almost the same as a leather strop such as this one here. The only thing is it doesn't work quite so well with multi-facets, so if you were using a micro bevel, you'd want to be lifting it up so you make sure you're polishing that micro bevel rather than the rest of the bevel, which is what you try to do when you strop anyway. or you're going up through the normal grits and not using a strop at all with a micro bevel. So I hope this video is another great video for you guys out there that are just getting started and can't find some leather, or don't want to have to go out and buy a leather strop, and can save you some money and get you started with just a piece of honing compound, really. This massive block here, that's practically going to last you a lifetime unless you also use it on a polishing wheel, which does cut them down faster. But if you're using it just for stropping like this, I don't think you can go wrong with the poor man's strop. And you could use these for a very, very long time. Now, one caveat is if you're getting them near water, because you've got other sharpening systems or you're locking it down next to a bunch of other sharpening stuff, I would suggest either keep your strop separate or use the plywood, because that's going to be more resistant to the sides getting wet, whereas the MDF might swell if it gets wet. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing down below. It really does help the channel out more than you know. And while you're down there, don't forget to comment. And if you'd like to support me a little bit further, please consider giving a super thanks if you got some value out of this video, or checking me out on Instagram and Patreon as well. And if you'd like to see another great beginner poor man's video like this, check out the video up here where I show you how to make the poor man's winding stick, and the playlist right here for all the Poor Man Tool series. Bye for now.